Welcome back to the Caniac Chronicles, folks. I'm your chronicler, Andy, and it is episode 21. It's been a couple weeks. I did take a week off last week, as I mentioned, out on, work-related travel for my 9 to 5. But we're back this week. 14 days have passed, lots to talk about. And we're going to try and get some of it, as much of it as we can, to keep it within an hour, though. But three main branches of conversation I want to get to today, starting with the very deserving Brandon Bussi. Definitely has been putting performance together recently that warrants a good like I kind of alluded a segment of time, a segment of airtime to speak to and about him and how successful he's been thus far and how great it is, obviously, for the Hurricanes. The second topic we're going to get into, the team is really starting to come together. I think it's pretty evident. I feel the fan base, being receptive to that and sort of seeing that happen in real time, and I think that's bringing some more patience, some more gratitude to the fan base, and that's good to see. And then finally, I want to touch upon, I won't mention the topic specifically, but sort of a retro slash futuristic look at things from where we're at today, and where things could go, and where it's come from thus far. So anyways, without further ado, Brandon Bussi. The kid is playing with his head on fire, right? Brandon Bussi is out here putting up phenomenal numbers for the Carolina Hurricanes. We did see, yes, like I was saying, actually not yesterday afternoon, sorry, it was Monday afternoon, the Martin Luther King game with Buffalo. Ended up being a pretty good battle, a pretty good goaltending duel between the Brandon Bussi of the Hurricanes and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen of the Buffalo Sabres. And the Sabres are a team that looked good this year. Obviously, if you watched the game on Monday, they're a team that is physically there, physically ready, I think, for the playoffs. And the Canes did a great job of, balancing that level of play from themselves with, getting what needed to get done. And that's, win the game ultimately. And it really kind of came entirely from Brandon Bussi. It was for his 18th win, not just on the season, but of his career. Let me pull him up here. He was the first star of the night that night. He posted a .944 save percentage. And he was off for a brief amount of time for like a delayed penalty, but and so his goals against average was like 101 that night. But 18, I believe he's 18-3-1 maybe in his first 22 starts. So he's the fastest goaltender in NHL history to get to that 18 win mark. Took him 22 games. He's putting up great numbers. He's putting up great performances. So he does have a shutout on the season already. And his save percentage here is .906. 906, typically I would say 906 is not really within the Stanley Cup Finals, conversation, or certainly like the Vezina. I think we tend to see save percentages up higher toward like the 920, 930 range for those two conversations to unfold. But at the same time, without looking at the full slate of goaltenders out there and what their save percentages are, I would say that they are probably generally down this year, as scoring, as we have seen, just not just for the Canes, but for a few teams at large across the league. We've seen some games, where it's more than a touchdown for a team scoring against an opponent, 7, 8, 9, even 10 goals. We saw Boston put up 10 against New York, and if you're out there watching the New York Rangers, that was a fantastic game to watch. But so anyway, so certainly anything over 900 though is very much a really good, really reliable goaltender. It's great to see Bussi with these numbers. It's great to see him in a Canes uniform. I feel like over the last few years, that is just something that we've been running into and we can't get around. Specifically in the playoffs, is a goaltender who's just playing with his head on fire, who can see and stop every little thing, and who you just simply can't get one by when you absolutely need it, or when you absolutely have the opportunity to do so. We see that passing play between I forgot who the second guy was, but Tage Thompson. There's a brief face off in the one dot. Sabres win the puck. No. Excuse me. It was a break. It was a break in. A 2-on-0. So it was a 2-on-0 against Bussi, and Tage, passes it one side for the one timer. Bussi, makes the movement over to cover the side, and then the pass immediately starts coming back to Tage Thompson, and Bussi makes an unbelievable shift of momentum and keeps that, right-handed glove out right directly in the shooting lane of Tage Thompson, and he absolutely snares it. It's, it was said very quickly, and I feel we hear this phrase at least once or twice when it's really not yet warranted, or it might be a little too early, or we haven't seen enough yet to really say so. But it was immediately mentioned, a potential, save of the year candidate for the league at large. And to be honest, I do have to agree. That is probably going to be, I would say easily in the top 3 saves. I don't think we've seen one yet this season that really pales in comparison to it. But there is, a little under half of the season left to go. So it's not to say we won't see something on its caliber or better. So there is a small, chance that it could be top 3, but it's a pretty good early nominee. And it's not even that early, I would say. We're past the halfway mark. But, an early entry for Save of the Year candidate, it was unbelievable. And it was on HBO, unfortunately, so I don't think I'll be able to pull, the clip of it. But I'll go back, I'll see if I can, and if I can, I'll pop it in right now. So yeah, it's just fantastic. It's great. Good. My brother is a Sabres fan. We were all lighting up the hockey chat with one of his friends who his brother happens to have been a friend of mine from high school, ironically, and then our cousin. The whole hockey chat was going kind of crazy that day, that whole weekend with football going on too, and whatnot. My brother, he recognized it. Like, he was down on his luck while it was going on, but after the game ended, he did cool his head off, and he recognized, hey, we just got goalied out there. I mean, they did play an unbelievable game. They're going to be a good opponent, whoever ends up walking into them, hopefully in round 1. I hope they make it this year. Buffalo, we felt it as Canes fans about 7-8 years ago now. Wow, yeah, 8 years ago now. We felt the weight of missing the playoffs lifted off our chests, and I hope to God it happens to you. I hope you get a chance this year, and if they do end up facing Carolina, it is going to be one heck of a game to watch, a heck of a series, to watch. I'm still in football mode, one game and you're out in the postseason in that sport. But yeah, so, just, I don't think it's a fluke. I'm pretty, I have a lot of trust now, a lot of faith in Bussi after these last few weeks. Just hope the guy keeps getting better. Hope he stays healthy. And hope this can carry on, well into the playoffs. That would be fantastic if it does. Next, we will go into the team at large. We've talked about it in the past on this cast. This team is just facing an immense amount of adversity with each other. They're getting through it, all of them. No matter who's filling in, no matter who's going down, it's a collective team effort this season, more so than I think it ever has been. slaving, your top defender, and not just the Hurricanes, but one of your top defenders in the entire league has been out for probably like 90% of the games, if not more, this season. I think he's maybe played a collective of 6 or 7 games, and we're approaching the 60 game mark here soon. So yeah, it's a little over about 10% of the games that he's been a part of so far, and it has shown at times, that they're dealing with that adversity in a negative way, meaning, losing out on points, losing out on wins, having really, detrimentally or, mentally deteriorating type wins, against like Florida, like we talked about the Florida weekend from hell between Florida, Tampa, and then Florida, those 4 or 5 days there. They're getting through all of it, and they're maintaining a great pace in the standings. They're leading the way in the East. Tampa has begun to heat up, so they're not the outright leader of the East anymore, but they're definitely a commanding force within the Eastern Conference right now, and essentially they're a shoe-in at this point for the playoffs, I would say. They probably need 15 or so wins remaining, maybe 10 to 15, depending on how the math lines up and what other teams are doing, before I feel they would probably end up getting a clinched spot. 10 more wins would give them about 80, 80, mid 80s to high 80s in points here. Let me just see. Yeah, it'd give you 86, so you'd practically be a shoe-in at that point. Once you hit that 90 mark, it's a pretty fair shot that you're going to be making the playoffs, and they've got 32 games left to do it. So it's looking like the Canes are going to be in the playoffs this season. It's really starting to look like the team that we've remembered in postseasons past, and even regular seasons past. They've had some pretty dominating wins across regular season games in recent seasons. As well as a lot of their playoff series, minus the Eastern Conference Finals year over year. But I like what I'm seeing. I really like the group and the personalities and the resilience that this team is needing to demonstrate this year. Not just through the injuries amongst themselves, but supporting your teammates through those injuries and being there for them when they can't be on the ice. And it's good to see. I think this, and don't get me wrong, I'm part of the fan base too, and I share a lot of these emotions too, but I do think the fan base has been a bit impatient with the group this season. At times, the season has felt sluggish. It has felt slow, specifically in the first couple months. And even in the last month and a half, there's been some tough games to watch. But something to be said in the recent games is you're not just dealing with all the injuries that you're dealing with if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, but think about the compact schedule that they're going through right now too. I think in the last 6 weeks, I should look this up, but in the last 6 weeks, I feel like Carolina has played 3 sets of back-to-back nights. There's been a ton of 4 games in 6 days, 3 games in 3 games in 6 days. There's been so many games and so much travel in such a quick amount of time this season because of, the fact that we're going to be seeing these players in February, next month in Italy, playing in the Olympics, hopefully. Now, the arena still looks questionable, but they're pretty they say they're confident. They say it's going to be ready, so we can only trust them until time push comes to shove. But there's so many factors, and every team is really feeling it this year. I think that also kind of contributes to the sheer amount of scoring we're seeing. How I mentioned there's been games 7, 8, 9, 10 goals for certain teams. There's been a lot of games also that are close, but they're like 6-7 and 3-4, 3-5 games like that where it's going both ways. So everybody's going through the same thing. You remind yourselves that, and so as long as you stick to your game, like the Hurricanes are very much getting into the rhythm of doing. And the last game against Florida was a brilliant demonstration of it. That last game against Florida kind of kicked off what was it? They're on a 3 or 4 game winning. Yeah, it kicked off with a 3 game, what hopefully turns into a 4 game tomorrow night against the Blackhawks. If I didn't mention it, the date, January 21st. We're recording in the late evening here. But they'll be playing, the Blackhawks tomorrow, and hopefully they turn this into a nice 4 game, win streak. But it all kicked off with that 9-1 win against Florida. And yeah, it was at home. And like I said in the Instagram update, I get it. It was a game where there's no Kachuk, there's no Marchand, there's no Seth Jones. There was one other person missing, one other big name missing from Florida. But the Canes really put the team in Florida, first of all, is still good without those people. That's how good they are, and that's why they're the back-to-back defending champions. It's plain and simple. But Carolina finally, got into, and that's basically the same team that they played when they blew those games earlier in the year against the Florida Panthers. But they finally, played a game where they didn't let them get into their heads. They didn't stoop down to their level and start playing their I won't say dirty, but their sketchy brand of hockey. They're unfavorable if you're an opponent fan of hockey. And they completely kept their thumb down on the Panthers' heads. They couldn't get up. They couldn't pull it up for air. It was nice because all 9 goals were credited against Bobrovsky. He had a horrible, horrible night in terms of the statistics. If you have him on your fantasy team, I'm sorry, but he got obliterated that night. And Bussi was in net. He happened to be in net. Had a tough one there that went in on him, and that was early in the game that tied it 1-1. But, he got over it quick. Very short-term memory for him, and he moved right on, and the Canes just absolutely marched over the Florida Panthers that game. There was something like 14 or 15 different guys who got points that night. A number of, multi-point nights. Ehlers with a freaking hat trick. I mean, what more could you ask for from that showing? And then we had a nice hat trick from Svechnikov the next day against New Jersey. So, you see this team is really starting to look like the team that we remember them to be. Aho is stepping up a lot more. He's being more of a physical force, again, it's sort of like a Matt Tkachuk-esque type personality, but he's not quite as wild. He does it in his own style. It's the Sebastian Aho style. But he's really starting to be more of a power forward, more of a playmaker. And having another power forward like, Svechnikov on your line is really creating a lot of chances for the two of them. You see it, and I think I want to say the last 7 goals by Svechnikov, I think the stat was the last 7 that he's had, including the hat trick on Saturday last week, all were assists from Aho. So the team, again, it's just we're getting closer now. They're starting to form again, form into more what we're used to seeing. They're playing more of this, playoff type hockey when they need to, and they look good when they do it. They had that rough game against Detroit that went to overtime and they lost, and then they had to take the shutout on the chin against St. Louis the next day. But they bounced completely back and they totally dismantle, the back-to-back defending Stanley Cup champions. So things are coming together. It's a lot of fun to watch. I'm really hopeful for where things are going with regards to that. Last but not least, so I kind of alluded to it at the beginning by kind of, phrasing it as like we're here now. How did we get here and where are we going? But more specifically, what I want to talk about is sort of the storylines that we're seeing develop here. And the reason it's going to be taboo that I'm talking about this, but if I haven't mentioned it on the cast, which I think I have, I don't share that superstition with most fans, I think, of various sports. I don't mind talking about, the taboo, the word, the conversation that should not be had, the, Lord Voldemort type conversation around my favorite team. I don't mind talking about it. And that is the storylines and the storylines that are happening in this moment that are going on right now. This is why I want to talk about it, because if it's not talked about it now, you're only going to live it retroactively. But it's happening. Live in the moment. Watch this unfold and see what's going on. Because down the road, when, if teams win championships, there's always the documentary on it, whether it's, a small town market like the Carolina Hurricanes, and it's just the DVD that you can buy at the end of the season that encapsulates the season at large, and looks back, and this interview with Tripp and that interview with so and so coming back, what all that stuff. If it's that's what happens, we always end up going, oh yeah, that was going on. I think a lot back to the 2004, well, first the 2003 World Series playoffs and World Series. I'm a Yankees fan. The Aaron Boone home run in extra innings there, I was awake for that. I remember that moment. I was elated. I was 12 and a half, 10 and a half, excuse me. I was a young kid. I was very impressionable, and it's a core memory, and we're going through those core memories right now, no matter how old you are, because Carolina's got a lot of storylines that are kind of developing here. You have, the veteran guys, the sort of, I don't mean this in any sort of disrespect, but the no-name players, who grind it out, who the true fans know their names, guys like Martinook, guys like Eric Robinson, they're not the Austin Matthews, they're not the Leon Draisaitl's and the Connor McDavids of the league, but they are the guys down in the lineup that get it done, that keep those guys rested and keep the score as is or better. And those guys are getting, the top guys are getting rests when those folks are on the ice. So every little bit that you get from them is that much more. Kind of like, points from your bench in the NBA. I know that's a big thing where, any points you can get from that are coming off the bench and are subbing in throughout the game is a bonus. It does all that much more. It's like compound interest on investments, basically. You have, there's so much going on. It is the 20th anniversary, so if the Canes did, end up pulling it together this season, it would be very fitting, that the captain of the team at the time is now the coach, and it would be his first Stanley Cup as a coach. You have the younger brother of, the phenom, the rookie superstar, Eric Stahl, at the time of that run. You now have his younger brother, who is your captain, who has been here for the last 12, 15 years. I remember the day that I got the text, saying that Jordan Stahl is going to be a Carolina Hurricane, and how exciting that was, and how I could foresee, that this was going to be a captaincy eventually, and here it is. And he's been here through the hard times. He's been here for the rebirth and the growth of Sebastian Aho. Well, the rebirth of the team and the growth of Sebastian Aho. You've got a lot of young bucks here. You've got Stankoven, you've got Blake, you've got Jarvis. All three of those players are very fitting to receive a Stanley Cup ring. I just realized all three of them are right-handed. So all the more reason to be breaking up Stankoven and Blake come postseason. I really want to see those three on separate lines. They seriously need some right-handed shots, and those are three really talented right-handed shots. So a little side note there. You've got the old talent too. You've got Taylor Hall. You've got Sebastian Aho and Andrei Svechnikov, as well as Nikolai Ehlers. Those four guys, two of them have been around the league for quite a while. One of them has been from team to team. One of them has kind of come from the Arctic tundra, and similar to the Hurricanes, there's always been so much more that franchise feels that they could achieve, as well as the fans, I think, of hockey in general. That franchise, unfortunately, has really fallen off and didn't amount to anything when they were there and really capable of putting everything together. And then you have two guys who have been on the team for almost the same amount of time and have seen this thing all the way through from breaking back into the playoffs and being where we are today. And that's Sebastian Aho and Andrei Svechnikov. And both of those guys would deserve a lot for sticking here for all this time. And Aho's commitment, not just visibly, you see it on the ice, or on that new YouTube thing, that My World documentary or like mini series they're doing on a number of different players. Aho has been vocal in the last couple of off seasons, and particularly this most recent one, that he envisions more for not just himself and his own game, but for this franchise, and he really feels like he owes it to this franchise in a sense. So there's all of that. you have guys who have done it in the past. Jordan Stahl, Will Carrier, the coach, Rod Brendamore. And Stahl specifically, he was kind of like Eric, but he was playing a much smaller role in the Stanley Cup that he won with the Pittsburgh Penguins and Sidney Crosby. So this one would really be a different type of championship for him, and it would be fitting, that it was actually it would be kind of cool if we were able to knock Pittsburgh out of the Eastern Conference Finals. A little early call there, who knows? Maybe I'll open up the FanDuel app and try and make some of my money back on what appears it will be a failed, Aho bet on the 100 points. And then you have new weapons who have come in to the team this year, Keandre Miller and Nikolai Ehlers. And again, both of those guys, particularly Ehlers, have been on teams who have had their shot, who have been almost at the top of the peak, and who have almost had that opportunity to participate in the final series of the best playoffs in all of sports. And that's not an opinion, that's a fact. Those two guys bring exciting stuff to the Hurricanes. They bring exciting new faces. And then don't forget, all the leadership that is held down in this locker room now between Aho, Slavin, Martinook, Stahl, Brendamore. It's really starting to rub off on Svechnikov. It has been rubbing off on Jarvis. I think that's why Jarvis was able to come back and deal with all the injuries he's been able to deal with on a quicker pace than I think what everybody sort of speculated out of the gate. By the way, I don't want to say I told you so, but I knew that wasn't going to be too long of an injury, and I'm glad it turned out that he's, A-okay there. So yeah, it's just, again, storylines, they're all, I think they're there always, but particularly this year, man, it would be fantastic for all these storylines to kind of culminate into what we all hope, ultimately hope happens year over year over year, don't get me wrong, but certainly in the near future with what they have on this roster at this moment in time. And again, it's been quite a while since I've said it, still $10 million in cap space. Let's get a quick check on that. So according to Puckpedia, they currently have $17.3 million in cap space. I don't know what amount of that is coming from the IR, but their projected cap space is going to be 7.7. So let's split the difference and be on the conservative side. I do think that they still have about $10 million in cap space here. And the trade deadline is approaching. I've heard a lot of rumors about players that Carolina is interested in. And I don't know if they're going to be making moves or if they're just going to be, trying to flat out sell moves within the roster. I don't know if they're going to be able to make any moves from within the roster out in terms of a trade. But certainly, we might see some prospects or some draft picks get offered up for some big-time player out there who might, want to make their way here and take on another Stanley Cup champion or maybe their first one, depending on who and where they're going to come from. So, yeah, it's an exciting time to be a Hurricanes fan right now. like I said, the Canes have always had it. They've always been there this season. It's just been a bit more sluggish than years past. I appreciate that they have not been all out in the playoff style hockey that they typically run during the regular season. I think that's really given them some brevity, and I think that that also it's been good. The timing is there. That's when you can become concerned, is when the timing is taking. If they come back from the Olympic break and they're still as sluggish as they have been all year, then there's some concern. If they start sliding in the standings, then there's some concern. But they've been at the top the whole time. They've taken care of as much business as they possibly can. And they do have some bona fide wins under their belt now, especially in the last couple of weeks here. There's a good amount of competition here coming up before the end of before the break, the Olympic break, and we'll have a lot to talk about over the course of that tournament. But Canes are in a really good position. Players are stepping up. Oh, Nikishin. I mean, I haven't mentioned him yet in the game or in the podcast, but he's been looking so much better. Fortunately, I have, my wife brought it to my attention. His name is one of the rumored names to be as an offer to, acquire some assets from in a trade, perhaps. I sure hope that he is not going to be moved. I really like where his game is headed. I like him playing physically. I like him taking, big shots from the point. And he gets back so fast too, so you don't have to necessarily worry about him out there in the ice creating, odd man rushes either for his goalie to handle or for his goalie and, his defensive partner to handle. And then, there's so many names on this roster that we could bring up, but I think I'm going to close it here. I kind of touched upon everybody. I think really the only one I haven't mentioned is Walker and Gostisbehere. They've been playing great. Oh, Joel Nystrom. I do want to just mention him. He's been playing fantastic. He's been putting together a great product of NHL hockey. You might not know, you might not notice him, you might not think that you see him on the ice all that much, but I tell you what, because he's a young guy and because the pressure is as high as it is in the NHL, that's a pretty good thing that you don't know who he is, because that means he hasn't done anything that is like, oh my God, who is this guy? And you see him kind of like remember the butt fumble from, what was it, Sanchez? Mark Sanchez? See, I'm not even a football guy, but you remember those plays. You remember those ugly plays. And you remember the name because it's on ESPN, all day the next day. It's on Twitter. It's on, X. It's on Instagram. So you don't know who he is. So that, to tell you what, I think that is a good sign. That's a great sign. He's got a really good game behind him. He's been awesome coverage. He's definitely going to be in the taxi squad come playoff if the Canes are fully healthy. Anyways, without further ado, folks, I do appreciate you listening if you have been listening. I hope you have a great rest of your day, great evening, great morning, great night, wherever you're at, wherever you are listening to, whenever you are listening to. But yeah, have a great rest of your day, folks. Take care. We'll be back next week, same time, Wednesday night. The Spotify goes up, and then that Thursday morning, I'll have the YouTube up. So I appreciate everyone. Take care, folks, and go Canes.